If you don't fuck with me, then I won't fuck with you.
If you don't fuck with me,
then I won't fuck with you.
but if you fuck with me,
I'm gonna fucking kill you!
That's a plan B.
There was an important trade this week. You know, we mentioned when we were talking about Dwight Howard that Morey tested us right away. And I really think that he tested the diehards in a way, in this way, because they were still, much like you know, in our very last episode, you were talking about Zhaire as a member of the rotation and the LeBron stopper. And he trades him for a fucking center, you know, given the history of the last few years. Zhaire Smith, I want your reaction. Just want to frame it. Zhaire Smith.
Well, first of all, I didn't call Zhaire Smith the LeBron stopper. That's misrepresenting what I think. I still think this team is lacking in big wings that can cover those kinds of players.
Yeah.
If Ben goes down, they're in a lot of trouble. So I think over the course of the season, they'll have to rectify that in some way. Yeah, I mean, the Zhaire Smith trade hurt me a lot, and I reacted strongly to it because, like, it just made me think about the whole thing. Like, this was right after they drafted Zhaire, right after Brian Colangelo got begrudgingly let go. They didn't want to do it, but they did. And it was we're not looking for a GM. We're just going to kind of ride it out with the sort of people we have here. And I was worried about it. And with the 10th pick in the draft, I'm pretty sure it's 10. They took Mikal Bridges, Philly kid, Nova kid, perfect fit. A guy I loved. I had him very, very high on my board. But then Phoenix offered them Zhaire and a future first, the Miami first, which at that time was actually going to look really good. It later on didn't look as good
because it wasn't the double draft. It was going to be the double.
It wasn't
draft.
the double draft,
yeah.
And also Miami got significantly better.
Yeah,
so it'll be next year's draft pick is what they acquired and then shipped out in the Tobias trade.
By the way, we've had both general managers. Oh no, because Elton didn't make that trade. I was going to say we had the two general managers that made that trade, but it wasn't Elton. We did have Ryan McDonough, but that was the
well, there wasn't a general manager.
Yeah,
it was Brett. I guess
it was Brett and David Heller. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love Zhaire. I thought I had him lower than Mikal on my board, but I loved him at Texas Tech. He was a raw player out of Texas Tech. And when you draft a guy like that and think about his potential, you're drafting him not for like he's going to come in right now and dominate. Not like, you know, the kind of player you're drafting when you take Zhaire Smith. And then I forget the order which happened first, but obviously he broke his foot and then had a terrible allergic reaction to sesame from the Sixers facility and lost 50 pounds and nearly died.
But before we blame the Sixers for a lot of things, Zhaire Smith didn't even know he had the allergy. So to that.
Has he said that?
Yes. He said he didn't know. They were unaware.
Okay.
They were unaware.
I'm sure it wasn't like some Sixers employee just like throttling, shoving it down his throat. But, and so like, obviously that took that year away.
Yeah.
And then this past year, he's recovering from that. It's essentially his rookie year, already a rookie year for like after an injury and for a raw player already. And it was half a season and then it's the coronavirus. And so like I know that his option was coming up. They had to decide whether to pick up his option. And it's not ideal to have to pick up a $5 million option for someone that you still don't really know what he is. But he's 21. He's been delivered.
Wait, real quick. I think you're skipping. Are you skipping a year or no? Was it only two? Only 2 years. Okay.
2 years.
Yeah.
And one of the years he almost died.
Right. This is the third year. This is the third year.
It's coming into the third year.
Right.
And so I just... It just the whole thing. Obviously, I feel bad for Zhaire that this stuff happened, and I feel bad. Like the thing that gets me most, and I say this a lot, like is just like logic. Logic really doesn't. It just fucks with me when there's just like you mishandle something so much and go like, well, there you go. And I get that it's sunk cost, and I get that Daryl Morey comes in and is like, well, he's not my guy. I didn't make that pick. I got to just go with what we have. But like the whole thing was just so poorly handled this whole time.
Well-
and you got to exercise. There's someone has to exercise a level of patience when all this stuff happens amid all this stuff, and just be like, hey, we're trading him for what I think he's a fine backup center, but to get him after Dwight Howard is frustrating. It's like another one position center that doesn't stretch the floor, at least as of now. And so it's just like, to me, it's like, well, what a pointless exercise. And I know the Pistons cut him, and I know that we'll see where he ends up, and maybe he has to go overseas and like figure it out, or maybe he never lands anywhere. And it's just like, this fucks up his career because like fit is part of it, and finding a place that will actually develop you and you can grow into a role or whatever it is. Like there's a chance that he just never makes it, and it's just like, it ends like that. But I think that the guy that Zhaire was out of college, I firmly believe is an NBA player. And I believe that had he been not poisoned and had a chance to actually develop, and I think he will, but even if he doesn't, I still believe that like that person was a player, and a good organization would have made that player into something useful and would have exercised the patience required to do that. And it's like, some of it's just the chance that they were drawn, and Daryl just like it, he has to make the decision to give this team the most flexibility as possible. So I get it. But like on the whole, if you zoom out, like I'm just very unhappy with how everything about Zhaire Smith was handled. And I want him to succeed really, really badly.
I want to agree and disagree. Agree in that when they drafted him, they knew he was a huge project. This also accelerated in a way that maybe they didn't know it was going to accelerate. Well, maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. He was a huge project in that in college, he was basically a power forward, and he projected as like a 2 or a 3 in the NBA, just based on size and build and all of those things. And he didn't have the requisite skills to be that. So they knew he was a project. I would disagree, though, and I agree that it's frustrating that we never get to see anything really. I would disagree in their handling of it. Like, they didn't poison him, and they also didn't break his foot. And when I watched him, you know, I saw enough of him. You know, he is not even close to ready. Is what I thought when I'm watching him. He looked honestly petrified. And that's not something that stats show, but when you're there and watching, he's super hesitant and has every right to be, given what they're asking him to do and what he had already done and what had happened to him. But he is, to my eye, very, very, very far away. And the only thing I would say about getting Bradley after they trade for Howard is that if you're admitting that the Howard thing is important because Embiid gets hurt every time, then you need a third guy, because you need 2 guys when Embiid gets hurt. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think that Tony Bradley is much better than Paul Reed, potentially. And so I think if you can be like, hey, when Embiid's down, your backup center is Paul Reed, or you can then make a move if he's out for like any long period of time, where if you need another guy, then fine. I really, for sure he's raw, and for sure, like last year he didn't look as good as I wanted him to, but like, I think there's something with, I mean, he's just like, he's 6'4", long as hell, strong as hell, or at least he was coming out of Texas Tech before they did poison him. And I firmly believe it was intentional. I don't. And so like, I just believe in like the switchability, the ferociousness as like a bouncier Avery Bradley. Like, he doesn't have,
but
like, his handle is very raw, but like,
yeah.
I believe in that ability. Like, I think like he had good touch around the rim and from the line. Like, I really, there was like a high IQ raw player in there. And whether it's like you blame him for some of it, or just the injuries, or the Sixers for not developing him, whatever it was, like, it didn't work out. And that bums me out, because I really do believe in the full package, or at least I did initially when it was after the draft.
The thing I wanted to talk about with Tony Bradley real quick is that it does seem like he has what's the word I'm looking for? He wasn't a nothing prospect, right? He was a pretty big prospect coming out of high school, and he did play 50 games last year for Utah, 50 or 60 games, playing 12 minutes a game, and fouls like every young big man does, but had a pretty strong rebound rate, like both offensive and defensive. Had basically 2 blocks per 36 minutes. And, you mentioned he's not shooting threes yet, but there's been, who used to be the Sixers reporter? What's her name? She was here like really briefly.
Camerata?
No, she worked at the Inquirer. Man, I forget her fucking name, but she was saying that he can shoot. He was just told not to shoot in Utah, that there's something there. So whatever, I can see it from both sides here. I understand your frustration, especially you as Mr. Prospect guy and mister Prospect guy who believed in him. But I also watched and realized that his position, if they don't have better players than him playing, then they're in trouble anyway, playing 2 and 3, I think. So, I
mean, they also the year after they draft Zhaire, they draft Matisse to do essentially the same thing. I'm not saying they're the same player, but the roles would be the same.
Right. But Matisse is I think, much further along.
Much further along. He's way older. He's even though he's drafted later, he's still like 2 years older. I mean, Tony Bradley's not bad. I think he's super long from memory. I believe his wingspan is like 7'5" or like 7'7", like some crazy wingspan. And so I think, but he's not like athletic. He's not bouncy. So I think he can get rebounds, but he's not like a big putback guy the way Dwight is.
Sarah Todd. I'm sorry. I just want to remember her name. Yeah.
I think he's probably fine. He's an expiring contract. Maybe they'll see if
he's restricted
he can play and he becomes Embiid's long-term backup. Who the hell knows? I would rather have like an actual stretch 5, as much as I more than anything want to believe in secret shooting potential. I always do.